Hello again, friends. So we're back at it now with an example of part writing. So I'm going to take you through the whole process. Just a few things. This is still Unit 4 on the AP, College Board Music Theory website. So this will be tested on this year's AP exam. I'm going to put all of my steps that I'm taking you through, and I'm going to list those in the description below. And I'd also like to say, just so that this video is not super duper long, it may be a little lengthy anyway, so that it's not longer than it needs to be, I'm probably going to kind of zip through it, not at lightning speed, but not as slowly as I would in class. Since it's a video you can rewatch, I would urge you to do that, or if I say something and it doesn't make sense, to scroll back and listen to it again. And of course, if you ever have any questions, you can message me or email me or put a comment in the link below, and I'll try my best to answer virtually that way. So let's get to it. So you're looking at a part writing example based off of figured bass. So we have the bass notes that are given. Excuse me, I got a text message. I don't want it to ding again. This is real world virtual teaching here. So you're given the bass notes and the figures. So you're used to this. This is realizing a figured bass, and that is step number 1. So step number 1 is to realize this figured bass. Now what I would do while you're doing this is to write in, and I think you can see this on the screen, the notes down below. So for instance, we're in D major, 2 sharps. That's given to you. 4/4 time signature. This first note is D, so this is a triad. There's no inversion, so triad built on D. So we know this is going to be a 1 chord. What I would do is come down here and write D, F sharp, A. So spell that chord out, right? This next one is a 6/4 chord. That's a second inversion triad. So you know you're looking at the 5th, so that means this is the 5th, this note is the 3rd, this note is the home note. So it's built on A. So the notes are A, C sharp, and E, with C sharp being, the E being the bass note. I'm going to write the bass notes always on the bottom. So actually you could come ahead and fill this in because you know what the bass notes are already. So we mentioned A, C sharp, E. It doesn't matter really what order you write those in. Just mark those up there. Okay, this is a first inversion chord, so the root is here, the 5th is there, so this is a D, F sharp, A, and is a 1/6. Sorry, I forgot to label this chord. The root is A, so this is a 5/6/4. Here, nothing written underneath it, so it's a triad built on E, E, G, B, in the key of D. Is going to be a minor 2, E, G, B. Again, if I go too fast, scroll back or pause it or whatever. I just don't want the video to be too long. We have a second inversion triad, so that means you're looking at the 5th of the chord. So there's the 3rd is there, the root is there. So this is built on D, right? So D, F sharp with an A in the bass. That is a 1/6/4. And then we have a 7th chord, there's a 7 there, built off of A. So we have A, C sharp, E, and G. And then our final chord is a triad built on D, which you know is a 1 chord. And apologies, that's a 5/7. So that is your first step, is to realize the figured bass, get your chord, Roman numerals in, and spell the chord beneath. So there's step 1. So step 2 is to find your tendency tones. And remember in the previous lesson, we talked about tendency tones being like scale degree 7 and the 7th of the 7th chord when you're moving from a dominant chord to a tonic chord. So find all your dominant to tonic chords and locate where your tendency tones are. Let's do these in like a bright red. So tonic, dominant, tonic. So there's a dominant to tonic. So you're going to have a tendency tone. In the key of D, it is the C sharp. And what I do is I draw an arrow to the D. It's going to resolve to the D. Now what you're going to do with this later is when you're part writing in either the alto, tenor, or soprano, if they're singing that C sharp, the next note has to be a D. So this is kind of a reminder to yourself. This is tonic, a predominant chord. We've got a 1-6-4, which kind of functions as a predominant. We have 5-7, which is a dominant chord, and going to a tonic. So in a 7th chord, remember you have 2 tendency tones. You have the C sharp again, so just like before, it's going to resolve to the D. But we also have the 7th of the 7th chord, which is this G, that resolves down a half step in a major key. So G is going to resolve to F sharp. So that's the next step, is to label your tendency tones when you have spelled them out down here. Go ahead and draw little arrows. Now, what I would go ahead and do at this point is to create your soprano. And what we're going to do to make sure all these chords are filled is as we write a note, we're going to strike through it. So the bass is given, so all of these bottom notes, just go ahead and put a little line through. Now, there's a lot of triads here and 4 voices, so you're going to double some notes, and that's why I don't scribble them out. I want to still be able to see them, but put a little slash through all your bottom bass notes, because those are given. You don't have to have those again. The notes that are not struck through are the ones that you're going to try to fill. So let's try to go ahead and write our soprano. So this is the way that you do this. If you remember our last lesson, you try to write it contrary motion or opposite motion to the bass. That's the best. So just first scan your bass line and kind of look at the flow of this bass. It kind of starts in the mid-range. It goes up, a little drop, a leap up, a leap down, and kind of comes back and finishes in the middle. So it's pretty jumpy, but it hovers around mid-range to start, up, down, and then back up. So when creating your soprano or your melody, since it starts mid-range and goes up, I would, trying to go down, I would not start with a low note, right? I don't know that I'd go to the very top of the range, because this starts mid-range, and so if the bass started way down here, I might start high. Since it's a mid-range note for the bass, I would probably start mid-range. So your notes to choose from, of course, are D, F sharp, and A. You've already got a D in this chord, but that's the root, and that's a good note to double. So you could write this D. You could probably also start on like this A right here. I would not start on the F sharp. That's just a little low for the soprano, and you would be condensing and squeezing your alto and tenor voices. I like doubling the root, especially in the melody. So I'm going to choose that D right there. I also, write your stem up, I also have some space, right? They can sing up to that G and maybe even that A if they absolutely had to. So I'm not starting at the ceiling. I'm near the top, but not at the ceiling. So I'm doubling the root. Now the bass goes up a note, so it'd be great if we could go down with the soprano. Your choice is A or C sharp. A would be a big jump. C sharp is down a step. This is up a step, so I like that. Let's do the C sharp. Do your stem up, and what we're going to do is just strike through that C sharp. Now, if you'll see, this was a tendency tone. We drew an arrow, so we don't have a choice. The next note has got to be a D. So there's a small red flag that goes up here because your bass went up and your soprano went up, and that's similar motion, and you want to make sure that that's not parallel motion. So you have to be careful. Similar motion is okay. The parallel motion, especially when it's fifths or octaves, are the no-no. So we have E to a C, right? A C sharp, so that's the interval of like a sixth. And of course, if we move up a second, it's still going to be the interval of a sixth. Nothing wrong with that type of motion. It's not parallel fifths or parallel octaves, so you're okay. So it's okay to follow that. You don't need to change anything. We'll strike through the D because we got it there. Now the bass drops down, so if we could maybe continue up, we could keep contrary motion. We need a G or a B. The G, that would be way at the tip top, and I don't know that you could get it. I mean, you could certainly do it. I like doubling the root. So the E, especially since this moves down one note, moving up stepwise is good contrary motion. So you're doubling the root of that chord, which strengthens the triad. So next, there's a leap up in the bass. So if you could get a leap down, that would be kind of perfect contrary motion, but as long as you're moving contrary, so if you could just get it to go down, whether it's a leap or not. So you need a D and an F sharp. Obviously you can't drop down to this F sharp, that's way too far. You could come to this A, that's also kind of a big jump, but you had to jump here. I kind of like just going down to the D. Now when you write this D, make sure that you write the same rhythm that's here. These are quarter notes, so I wrote quarter notes. These are half notes, so I wrote half notes. The last note is a whole note, so I'm writing a whole note in the last measure. Make sure that those match. So we got the D, we can strike through that. So next, there's a huge leap, an octave leap in the bass. You know, if we could, contrary motion would be to go up a note to maybe the E. So you could write it up. You could get the C sharp as well if you wanted to. I like ending on 7-1 with the soprano. You certainly could go E and then back down to the D. But even though it's similar motion, I'm going to write the C sharp just because I like what that does. C sharp leads you to D. What that does is it creates a perfect authentic cadence. Now there's nothing wrong with writing an imperfect authentic cadence on this part writing. As long as all the part writing rules are met, you're fine. I just like the way it just kind of cleans it up. Now there is similar motion, but we have an A to a D, which is a fourth, an A to a C sharp there, which is kind of an expanded third. You're okay. You didn't write any parallels there. You wrote similar motion, but not parallels. There is similar motion here, but it's, again, A to C, which is an expanded third, to kind of D to F, which is a third, so it's kind of similar thirds there, you're fine. So we got C sharp and D. So our soprano line is written and looks pretty good. So next, what you're going to do is fill in, and I say this because you want these parts to be boring, the alto and the tenor. Use common tones. In other words, if you can sing an A in one note, in one chord, and the next chord stay on that note, just do that, right? Only move them if you have to, and try to keep them as boring as possible. When you write these, write the tenor and the alto at the same time. So let's do that. So we need an F sharp and an A. We could do this A here, but the problem is if we do an A here and try to get this F sharp, we're going to be breaking a spacing rule, because if I write an F sharp here, then the alto, an octave above, is going to be right there. If I write the A, I'll break the spacing rule of staying within an octave. So I'm going to write the alto on the F, stem down, and then the tenor on the A, stem up, and I got our two notes there. Right, so far so good. Keeping common notes when possible. Everything's good with the spacing. Keeping common notes when possible. The only note that we absolutely had to have in this next chord was an A, because we crossed through our C sharp and our E already. The tenor is already on an A, so leave your tenor there. Now, of course, you've got to double a note. The strongest note to double is the root, which the root of this chord is the A. You've got some options. You could double the fifth, It's a 6/4 chord, which, you know, it would be strong to double the fifth there. I'm going to choose just to double the root. There's nothing wrong with that. Right there. So a little jump, but we've got, you know, contrary motion there. There's some similar motion from bass to alto, but we're not breaking any part writing rules. All right, going into this next chord, we need another A. And again, the tenor is already on an A, the alto is already on an A. I'm just going to leave the tenor there since they've been singing that note already. So this is a 1/6 chord. You know, usually you would look to double the root if you can. I don't want to, I could bring this down to this D, it would be within an octave, but just for simplicity, I'm going to double the A. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, doubling the fifth of that chord. So you could use the D down here. I just don't like jumpy alto parts. So alto and tenor part, so I'm going to try to keep it as plain as I can. So you're covered there. So here you have an E here, and you need a G and a B. So what I would do is to go, you know, I would go closest note without a whole lot of movement as possible. Let's get the B with the tenor and the G with the alto, right? That's one possibility. Nothing wrong. Our spacing is good. We got good contrary motion. I don't see any parallels, so I think we're safe. So far so good. Here to this 1/6/4 chord. Now this is where things are going to get kind of tight because the bass is so high. You've got to be careful. You know, not to get things. It's gonna create a lot of spacing issues when things get tight like that. And I just saw another reason, actually, why you would not want to write your tenor on a G in this chord, because the bass in this chord comes to an A, which would be overlap, right? We talked about cross voices where one's higher than the other, and it shouldn't be. Overlap would be where the bass is above the tenor in the previous chord. So actually we had to write that B there. We could not have written the G here because we would have created overlap in this next chord. So, good. Glad we didn't do that. So what we need in this chord, all we need is an F sharp. The tenor is nowhere near an F sharp. The alto is very close to 1, so I'm going to send the alto there, again writing the same rhythm, rewriting half notes. Now this is a great little trick. We got the F sharp. You could double a D, you could double an F sharp, or you could double an A. This is a really cool trick, and I call it a trick, but it's not a trick. It's just, I kind of like doing it. Instead of writing a note up here, floating this up, you could float this up to the D. What I like doing, especially in a 6/4 chord, is to double the bass note. You're doubling the fifth. And to do that, all you would do is write a stem up off of that note. And that's totally acceptable. I would not overdo this. I would not do this multiple chords in a row. But for one chord, especially where the voicing is kind of tight, and it's a little tight here between like alto, tenor, and bass, I think it's perfectly fine. So going into the next chord, this is our dominant chord. We have an A, we have a C sharp, so we need an E and we need a G. Again, the tenor is not really close to an E. You could have them jump way up, but I'm going to keep it kind of close right there with the G. Now this is a tendency tone, so go ahead and follow your arrow and resolve that there. And then that means that we need the E here. Okay, so we've got that chord done. Now I will say, before we move in, we've got to fill one more note in. There's some red flags that pop up. I'm sorry, and this stem, I just realized for the bass is pointed the wrong way. Pardon that. there are some red flags for me here. There's a lot of similar motion, right? D down to C sharp, F sharp to E, A down to G. And there's red flags. You just want to check for parallel. And you know, here we've got a sixth, moving to a sixth. We've got A to D, so that's kind of an expanded fourth. We've got A to F sharp, so that's a sixth. So we're okay. We didn't, even though there's lots of similar motion there, we kind of lucked out and didn't break a part writing rule of the parallel fifths and octaves. So we're good, but I just wanted to mention that when you see a lot of similar motion, just be very careful, double check your work. In this last chord, we have D, F sharp, and then to kind of fill the chord, we need an A. Here's the problem. I can't write an A right there, and the reason is if I did, I would break the spacing rule. So this F sharp is here, this is an octave right there, that F sharp. So if I wrote the A, I would create the chord, but I would be breaking a rule, the rule of spacing. So the only thing really that I can do here is to write a D, which I'm doubling the root, and we are omitting the fifth of this chord. Which is perfectly fine. We have an octave there in the roots, and then we have the root on the bass, and we have the third in the F sharp. Remember, if you have to leave a note out of a triad, or any chord, really, a seventh chord as well, leave the fifth out. And we did that to avoid a spacing issue. Okay, I think that's about it. For suggested time on one of these, I wouldn't worry so much about the time at first. On the AP exam, I think the suggested time is about 15 minutes. Of course, your free response, when you do that, you have a set number of time, a length of time to do all these free response questions, and so you have to space that out and you have to manage that time. But I think suggested time is usually 15 minutes. Of course, when you're starting this, it's going to take longer, and I wouldn't worry about timing yourself at first. So, anyway, I know that's a lot to remember, but you take things a chord at a time. If there's any time left on the free response before you would move on, is you would just want to kind of double check, kind of glance over. But the nice thing about doing it the process which I described here is that you did it a chord at a time, and you were checking as you went. It's very difficult to finish it and then check all of it. It's difficult. You're checking as you go. So the next video is going to be doing this, but in a minor key. So have fun. I'm going to put some part writing examples for you on the Husky Band.edublogs website. Just click the AP tab. Go down and you'll find it'll probably say part writing examples. It'll be a PDF so that you can practice on your own. So good luck.